There is a crow on the wire outside your window. It has been there for a while, and though you may not have noticed, it has noticed you. It knows the shape of your face. It knows whether you have ever done it harm, and if you have, there is a chance it has already told the others. We tend to assume the birds around us live in a blur, that to a creature with a brain smaller than a walnut, one human looks much like any other. We are, after all, giants to them, featureless, interchangeable, or so we thought. Because when scientists began to look closely at what birds actually see when they look at us, they found something that should not be possible in a brain that size. Something that raises a far stranger question. Not simply whether birds can tell us apart, but whether, in some sense, they are keeping track of us, watching, remembering, judging. And the deeper researchers followed that question, the more unsettling the answer became. It began, as many strange discoveries do, with an annoyance. On the campus of the University of Washington, a wildlife biologist named John Marsliff kept noticing something odd about the crows he studied. The birds he had trapped and banded for research seemed to hold it against him. They scolded him, dive-bombed him, singled him out specifically among the thousands of people crossing campus every day. It sounded absurd, so he designed an experiment to test it, and the design was beautifully simple. He and his colleagues pulled on rubber masks, a caveman face, while they captured and banded a handful of crows. Unpleasant for the birds, but harmless. Then they took the masks off and walked away as themselves. What happened next unfolded over years. Whenever a researcher later crossed campus wearing that same caveman mask, the crows erupted. They scolded, they mobbed, they chased the mask across the sky, raising an alarm to every crow within earshot. Wearing a different, neutral mask, the very same person could walk by in peace. It wasn't the human the crows were reacting to. It was the face. But that was only the beginning of the mystery, because the number of crows that hated the caveman mask kept growing. Birds that had never been tracked, that had never had a single bad experience with that face, began scolding it too. Young crows, born long after the experiment, inherited the grudge. The knowledge was spreading through the population like a rumor, passed from bird to bird, parent to chick. Years later, in some cases more than a decade on, crows were still mobbing a mask worn by a person who had, as far as they knew, done nothing at all. The crows were not just recognizing a face, they were remembering it, sharing it, and teaching it to a generation that had never witnessed the original crime. If mysteries like this one fascinate you, the hidden intelligence moving quietly through the world just outside your window, consider subscribing. Every week we follow another thread into the secret lives of the creatures we think we already understand. For a while, it was tempting to file all this away as a quirk of crows. They belong to the corvids, the family that includes ravens, magpies, and jays, birds with a reputation for intelligence that rivals some primates. Perhaps recognizing faces was simply another of their party tricks. Then a biologist named Douglas Levy turned his attention to a far more ordinary bird, the northern mockingbird, nesting in the shrubs of a Florida university campus. On 4 successive days, a volunteer approached a nest and gently touched it, then left. By the 3rd day, the mockingbirds had had enough of that particular person. They flushed from the nest sooner. They dove at the intruder's head. But when a completely new person, dressed identically, approached the same nest, the birds stayed calm. In a matter of days, after only seconds of exposure each time, the mockingbirds had learned to pick one human being out of the thousands streaming across a busy campus. These are birds that live only a handful of years, birds we walk past without a glance, and they had quietly memorized us. And then there are the pigeons, perhaps the most overlooked birds on Earth, the ones we step around on sidewalks, the ones we assume are little more than feathered automatons. In a park in Paris, researchers ran an experiment with 2 people of similar size and build. One scattered food and let the pigeons feed. The other chased them away. Soon the pigeons learned to avoid the hostile one and flock to the generous one. Nothing surprising there. But then the 2 people swapped their coats and swapped their behavior. The pigeons were not fooled for a moment.
They ignored the clothing entirely and tracked the individuals by something else, by their faces. Stop and consider what these three birds have in common, because on the surface they share almost nothing. A crow, famous for its cunning. A mockingbird, a small and unremarkable songbird. A city pigeon, the most dismissed creature on the street. They sit on wildly different branches of the family tree, live wild.
When a talent appears again and again across unrelated species, biologists take notice. It usually means the ability isn't a rare accident at all. It means it is useful enough that evolution keeps reinventing it. And this is where a simple story about clever birds cracks open into something much deeper. Because a bird's brain is built nothing like ours. It has no neocortex, the wrinkled outer layer that, in humans, does much of the heavy lifting of perception and thought. For most of the last century, that absence led scientists to assume birds simply couldn't be capable of much. The word bird brain became an insult for a reason. That assumption turned out to be one of the great mistakes of modern neuroscience. Birds evolved intelligence along an entirely separate path. Deep in the avian brain sits a region called the nidopallium caudolaterale, which appears to perform many of the same jobs as our prefrontal cortex: planning, decision-making, holding an idea in mind, despite having a completely different structure. Two very different brains, separated by hundreds of millions of years of evolution, arriving at similar abilities by different roads. Recognizing a face is one of them. Marsluff wanted to see this happening, so his team did something extraordinary. They scanned the brains of living crows while showing them human faces, some belonging to people who had threatened them, some to people who had cared for them. The threatening faces lit up regions tied to fear and to memory. The caring faces lit up different circuits entirely. The crow was not simply seeing a face, it was feeling something about it, attaching an emotion, a history, a verdict.
But knowing that birds recognize faces only sharpens the real question, the one scientists are still wrestling with. How exactly do they do it? When you recognize a friend, you don't consciously add up their nose and eyes and jaw. Your brain grasps the whole face at once as a single pattern, a process called holistic recognition, handled by a patch of tissue devoted almost entirely to faces. It's why a face turned upside down suddenly becomes so difficult to read. Do birds do the same? Do they possess their own dedicated face processing machinery, seeing us as whole, unmistakable identities? Or do they assemble us more piece by piece, a distinctive brow here, a particular walk there, building recognition from fragments? The honest answer is that we don't yet know. There are hints on both sides, and the experiments are difficult. It remains one of the open frontiers of animal cognition, not whether birds see our faces, but how the image takes shape inside a mind so
Whether you've ever chased one from your garden, or startled a nest, or just as easily left out food on a hard winter morning, because the evidence suggests they keep track of both. There are people around the world who have been brought small gifts by crows, buttons, beads, bits of bright glass, apparently in return for years of quiet kindness. We can't yet be certain what those offerings mean to the bird, but the recognition behind them is real. It changes something once you know it. The birds outside your window were never merely part of the scenery. You were never invisible to them. Every morning at the feeder, every walk beneath the trees, you have been a recognizable figure in a story the birds are telling one another. A face with a name you'll never hear, filed under friend, or filed under threat. We spent so long.
And if a crow can hold the memory of a single human face for the better part of a lifetime, what else is it remembering? What else moves through those small, ancient brains that we have never once thought to ask about? Because the closer we look at the birds sharing our streets and gardens, the clearer it becomes. The mystery was never really about whether they can see us. It's about how much of the world they understand that we have only just begun to notice.